Welcome back to Politics Tonight. Joining me this evening in our WGN studios, he's a professor at Chicago State University and a board member at Donda's House. It is a face you all know so well, Garrard McClendon. Garrard, so good to see you.
Paul, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
And by the way, when I say Donda's House, would you, for folks out there who they may not know the name Donda, but they sure know her son.
Yes, most definitely. Donda's House, Kanye West. You know, Donda West, Dr. Donda West was a professor at Chicago State University. Of course, her untimely death was a few years ago, but we started an organization along with Donnie Smith and Che Rhymefest Smith, the Grammy Award winner.
And one potentially future alderman one day.
Absolutely.
I want to take you into Dr. Martin Luther King. One of the things you and I, we chatted before this, and you were talking about how much he accomplished at such a young age. And I tell you what, I asked a few people around the newsroom, how old do you think Martin Luther King was when he was killed? And people thought, in his 40s, in his 50s, you know. How old was he?
Man, you see, that's the thing, 39.
39.
He put in work. And it's almost as if he had some sort of premonition that he was going to die young, because this guy graduates from high school at 15. He graduates from Morehouse College at 19. He gets a PhD at 26 years old from Boston University.
Now, he skipped a couple of grades in there, right, along the way.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
But this is a man on a mission. You know, after he gets his PhD, Paul, he goes immediately to Montgomery, Alabama to start the Montgomery Improvement Association, which, of course, Rosa Parks, the bus boycott. Black people did not ride buses for 13 months. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and that movement, they hit them economically, and they had to desegregate after that.
You know, I think, again, we look back now where we're seeing the memorial in Washington, D.C. Again, I think about what young people, you and I were both around for part of that effort, although I was young. But when people sort of look back and realize what one man can do, you studied him so closely, how is it that one man, with the help of many, had the influence he had?
I think it's a perfect storm, Paul, when you look at the fact that this man was driven by social justice. This is a man driven by having a high academic achievement, and he's driven by Daddy King, of course, his father, and he's driven by the black church. Very high expectations here. So there's a moral fiber and an educational fiber that Martin Luther King had that so many people even today still don't have.
And part of it, I think we have to respect the fact, his skills for oratory. Yes. President Obama gets that nod, right? Jesse Jackson Sr. gets that nod, but that's so critical to making things happen, the power to move people with your voice and your presence.
If you know a lot, that doesn't make you a good leader. If you're a good speaker only, that doesn't make you a good leader. Martin Luther King, the whole package. Unbelievable oratory, the vocabulary, his use of allegory and metaphor, just beyond compare. And to this day, I mean, you know, you look at speech and debate teams throughout the country and throughout the world, they still use Martin Luther King tactics.
People look at the way it was back in the 60s or 50s beforehand with, you know, the signs, colored people here, right, white people, all that kind of thing. We look at that like it is ancient history. It is not that long ago. If Dr. King were here today, what would he say about the status of race relations in our country today?
I think he would still be a little upset. I think he'd be upset that there is still lots of covert racism taking place today. I think he'd be upset with such a high unemployment rate in the African American community, such a high illiteracy rate among African American boys. 64% of fourth grade African American boys are functionally illiterate. King would be devastated by such statistics.
President Obama has the role that Dr. King might never have envisioned was possible at that time. So how would King, do you believe, look at President Obama and what he has been trying to accomplish in his 2 terms as president?
I think the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would look at President Obama with a very critical eye, because King was non-violence. I think Dr. King would be very frustrated with drones. I think Dr. King would be very frustrated with dates that where the United States says we're going to get out of a territory such as Afghanistan or Iraq.
You think he'd be addressing those kinds of issues today, as opposed to President Obama's efforts when it has to do with, you know, being a young black man, being those kinds of issues?
Yes, because see, King's not going to straddle the fence. King is going to be firm, whereas when you're president of the United States, you have to please too many parties. Barack Obama has done that. He's tried to please too many people. When you try to please everyone, your success rate is very low.
Can I ask you an unfair question?
Yes.
Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, Nelson Mandela. When you think of those people, who has the greatest? I mean, if you go in history, look back.
You're not right, Paul. You're not right. I think looking back on history on a worldview, probably Nelson Mandela. 26 years in prison. I think on a worldview and United States view, and I would have to go with Dr. Martin Luther King. And then thirdly, from more of a metaphorical view, I would look at President Barack Obama.
But that's a fair enough answer.
Yes.
Because of course President Obama influenced by the other two.
Yes.
I'm guessing Nelson Mandela influenced by King.
Yes, yes,
Right.
most definitely. Because look, when you look at segregation in the United States and you look at apartheid in South Africa, the similarities are uncanny.
So we have just a moment left. Again, if you were to say, Dr. Martin Luther King was here and he said, this is what you need to work on in the future. This is your #1 issue. What would it be for Dr. King?
Probably poverty. This war on poverty and this war on low expectations when it comes to education, these are the bookmarks and hallmarks that I think that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would look at.
Dr. Garrard McClendon, what a pleasure to have you here tonight.
Dr.
And
Paul
we'll see you
Lisnek,
good.
thank you.
Yeah, King might be proud of he'd be more proud of you because my doctor, I didn't do anything with it. When we come back, President Obama weighs in the controversy of legalizing marijuana and opens up about his visit to Chicago's Hyde Park Academy last year. We'll be right back.